A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks, published in 1907. Colonel Freeman's Second Raid, Number 45. Sometime in the spring of 1862, Colonel Freeman, not being satisfied with his first raid on the Federal troops at Salem, planned the second raid to attack the troops then stationed at Salem, Missouri. He organized his scout and compelled one Robert Bolin, who now resides in Howell County, to pilot him through the lines as he, Bolin, had lived near Salem before the war. On reaching Salem, Colonel Freeman halted his troops and planned his attack. The Federal troops had no knowledge of the approach of any rebel forces. They were in squads around Salem. Freeman divided his forces and gave them a countersign and selected a spot near a deep ditch in the road and instructed them, if they were defeated and got scattered, to concentrate at that ditch which was beyond the Federal lines a distance of some miles. On reaching the ditch, they were to remain until they all were collected. After the first ones reached the place, it being dark, if they saw others approaching, they would halt them and demand a countersign, and if they couldn't give it, they were to fire on them without any further delay, knowing they were enemies. On reaching the public square, they encountered a bunch of the Federal troops in the building, fired on them, wounded a few. A man by the name of Jacob Schoffer, now residing in Howell County, was in the house at the time, and they cut his clothes in about 20 different places with bullets and never drew blood. Major Santee was commanding with one other officer. After they had rallied, all being in disorder, Major Santee ordered a charge on the rebels. Armed with an old pistol, he met Colonel Freeman of the Confederate side. Freeman had just shot out. Major Santee ordered his surrender. Colonel Freeman started to run. Major Santee, in close pursuit, snapped his old pistol, which failed to fire. He then threw the pistol at Colonel Freeman, struck him somewhere between the shoulders, drew his saber, and still continued the pursuit. There was a creek nearby, and a stone fence had been built along the side of it. The creek had been frozen over and a skiff of snow on it at the time. Just as Freeman reached the stone fence, Major Santee made a thrust at him with his saber, inflicting a slight wound. About that time, for the purpose of escaping, Colonel Freeman sprang over the stone fence and lit into the creek. Major Santee, being on horseback, could not pursue any further. The rebels, by this time, were scattered in all directions, started to retreat. It being very dark, the first ones, 50 or 60 in number, reached the ditch, halted to wait for the remainder of them to collect. In a short time, about 30 or 40 more of them appeared in sight, retreating with considerable speed. They were halted, the countersign demanded. They had become so excited at the fight they had forgotten the countersign and failed to give it. So those who arrived first opened fire and wounded several of them, scattering them to the woods. They failed to concentrate until they had retreated south about 30 miles, where they learned of the mistake they had made and that they had fired upon their own men. Major Santee, being of the opinion that he had seriously wounded Freeman with the saber, concluded to investigate. On reaching the stone fence where he made his leap, they looked over into the creek on the ice, and Colonel Freeman being a large man, it looked like a large ox had been thrown over from the hole that he made in the ice. They saw that he had crossed the creek and reached the other side and saw no signs of blood. In the engagement, there were about 5 or 6 wounded and killed. In the summer of 1863, there was a Federal scout organized at Springfield, commanded by Colonel Holland. It was ordered to move by way of Douglas County, get reinforcements then stationed at the fort, and from there march through the county of Ozark. They entered the county of Fulton, Arkansas, where they had several small engagements. After considerable fighting and capturing a number of prisoners, they returned to Springfield. Loss, killed and wounded, very small. In the fall of 1863, Colonel Tracy, with a force of rebels, made a raid from Fulton County, marched up through Ozark County, and on reaching the Union settlement in Douglas County, he shot and killed nearly every man he captured, robbed houses, took everything in the house and out of doors, and burned the houses as he went. After raiding and pillaging a number of houses, he came to a house where a Union man by the name of Mahan and one by the name of McCarty were working in the blacksmith shop with their arms near them. They were members of the Home Guard. The rebels demanded the surrender of the two men, and as it was generally believed that if a man surrendered to those irregular forces that it was sure death, they refused to surrender. When the forces of Colonel Tracy commenced firing through the cracks of the shop, the men returned the fire. Mahan killed one rebel, and they wounded 2 or 3 others. The rebels shot McCarty down, shooting him 8 or 10 times after he fell, knocked the door down, and rushed upon Mahan, disarmed him, took him prisoner, and then continued their retreat. After reaching Fulton County near the bayou, they took Mahan into the woods, stripped him naked, and shot him, leaving his body lying on the ground unburied. Strange to say, in regard to McCarty, after he had been shot 8 or 10 times and left for dead, he recovered from the wounds and became hardy and stout. Sometime in the early part of the spring of 1864, a man by the name of Mahan deserted from the 11th Missouri Cavalry, stationed at Batesville, and on reaching Howell County, about 2 miles from where Valley Star Schoolhouse is now located, a bunch of bushwhackers commanded by B.F. Hawkins and Thomas Yates captured him, took him into the woods a short distance, stripped him naked, and shot him, leaving his body lying on the ground unburied. After he had lain there nearly a week, a man now residing in Howell County took a hoe and shovel and raked up some rocks and pitched them upon the decomposed body and threw a few shovels of dirt on him. As it was but a short distance from the road, the stench from the decomposing body was offensive to persons who traveled by.